This episode is brought to you by Battleborn Batteries, the best name in the RV and marine industry. These lithium batteries are designed and assembled in the USA, backed by a 10-year warranty. The best solution for your battery anxiety, so go check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.
You are listening to Beyond the Wheel, a podcast about the people and ideas that drive the RV community forward.
Today we are joined by author and adventurer Joe Russo. He talks to us about the writing process, the challenges of life on the road, and all that is We're the Russos. We really enjoyed talking with him and learning more about the writing process and the challenges of RVing. Before we get started, we want to thank folks for leaving reviews and rating the podcast. We really appreciate the feedback. Now, let's get started with our conversation with Joe.
So, Joe, I know there are going to be people that already are familiar with you, and I think the very first question that I have for you is, have you had your coffee just yet?
Yes. So there's no way I could do this before coffee.
Very good. I also have my coffee.
We filmed something this morning, a little intro, outro to a video, and I was actually drinking my coffee during it. And you can watch the progression of like a total hot mess in the beginning to like a polished piece at the end as I made my way through the coffee.
So, Joe, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? What was your background prior to becoming a full-time RVer? What got you into RVing? Just that type of stuff?
My former life, I was at a very large company and was in advertising and product development. It was one of those jobs where I was basically on call 24/7. Kate and I have this story that we like to tell that for the longest time, a lot of my products would go live at 3 a.m. It was a television company. And there were multiple weeks in a row for about a year where there was some glitch in the system. And when the stuff went on air, it didn't work. So I would get a phone call at 3 a.m. in the morning. And it was the same person every time. And after a while, she's like, I really want to meet this person to find out who's calling you at 3 a.m. But that was the kind of job it was. You always had to be ready. You always had to be like on point and checking email and that sort of thing. And Kate had a similar job. We were both getting really stressed out of the lifestyle. Finally, one day, Kate had just had enough and said, you know what, let's sell everything, get rid of the house, quit our jobs, hit the road. And I called her crazy. But, you know, I took a little bit of time to think about it and remembered something my father told me before he passed away, which was he wished he had taken more risks and had a lot of children. That was his advice to me. Take risks and have a lot of children. So I decided to go for it. I called her up, said, let's do it. And that is kind of the beginning of the story and of how we got on the road.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a good story.
So this was Kate's idea. I should have realized that because it is in your first book, but I think I forgot that.
It was all her idea. And it was all based on, have you guys seen the movie We're the Millers?
Yes.
Okay. So we had actually watched that movie the morning that she came up with this idea. We watched the movie, went over to her parents' house. She was getting phone calls from work. And that's when she just kind of blew up and said, no more. And when I was talking to her about it later, asking her how she came up with this idea, the movie was kind of that impetus. She had watched the movie, seen them driving around in this RV, and just thought that would be a great way to get out and see the country, take our dogs with us, because we had 2 dogs at the time. I said, okay. And when we started thinking about actually putting a website together so we could share our story with friends, we came up with We're the Russos based on We're the Millers.
Ah.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
So just the RV part, not the running drugs from Mexico part.
Yeah. Although if this YouTube thing doesn't work out for us, we may have a fallback. So.
See, I was going to say I saw that movie also. We're the Millers, and it is very funny. But I never looked at that movie as being inspirational to, hop in an RV full time and live out my life that way. So that it's actually good though that you say that, because my next question for you is about your first book, your previous book, Taking Risks. And I found it very inspirational. I'm living in an RV, and when I read the book, I was like, wow, this is such a great book to give people this inside view. And you have a very good I don't know if it would be considered a knack, but you walk people through this book and you have such an attention to detail that it feels like we're right along for the ride and the steps that you guys were taking and what you were feeling in that moment. And then I found it to be very inspirational for people to read this and jump into the lifestyle. Was that the goal of the book?
Kind of. So, and I just need one correction. So the name of the book is actually Take Risks. It's one couple's journey to quit their jobs and hit the open road. The idea for the book started as we would be on the road and people would meet us and they'd learn we were full-time RVers, and they would ask us how we were able to do this at such a young age. We would tell them the story, we'd get into it. And it just got to a point where I said, I'm just going to write a book, and anytime anyone asks about it, I'll just point them to the book. But when I started the book, it was more about just telling a general story. As I started getting into writing it, I thought, hey, I could actually make this a resource for people. I didn't want to write a how-to book, but I did want to write something that illustrated everything that we went through, all the highs, all the lows, and the thought process through everything. And as I started writing, I got more and more into that. And actually, one of the first chapters I wrote was about our bucket toilet that we built for the RV and how that went horribly wrong. And I thought, this is actually, it's fun, it's funny, it's informative. So I ran with it, and all the chapters kind of had that same theme to them, is, every chapter has its own little story or takeaway or something like that.
So was that the first book that you had ever written?
Yes, it was one of those things where I started it for a while and I could never get past the first page. Then Kate and I were interviewed on another podcast called the Word Slinger podcast. And the gentleman is an author, self-published author. The podcast is all about writing books and that, but he was also very interested in the RV lifestyle, as he and his wife were in an RV. So we're on there, and I told him that I've been trying to write this book and I might do it one day. Well, he got excited about that and made it his mission to kind of mentor me through the process. And he gave me two pieces of advice, which were, one, when you're writing, your sole job is to sit down and write. You're not an editor, you're not a proofreader, you don't go back and reread stuff, you just go, let your brain go. And the second one was to try and develop a daily writing habit. So doesn't matter if it's 5 words or 500, you sit down, you write every day. And I took that to heart, got past the first page, and was able to knock out the entire book, which I think is 280 some pages.
When you're in the writing mode, what can you walk us through, like a typical day and what your writing is like? How did you develop that habit?
Well, I have to say it's a hard habit to keep, which I break the habit quite a bit. And it's one of the reasons why my second book has taken so long to come out. But when I do get into the zone, so to speak, I usually try to find the same time every day. I sit down, open my laptop, open my writing software, and I start writing. And once I've made it through that first sentence, I tell myself that, good, you've done it for the day. So I don't worry about word counts or things like that. As long as I've sat down and I've typed out at least a sentence, I consider myself good and I've written for the day. And the nice thing about that is it frees me up so that if I want to keep writing, I can. If I'm just not feeling it, I can put the laptop down, and you don't punish yourself for having missed a day or 2 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you find that difficult, though, with the RV lifestyle of moving around and, just the constant change, to have that type of structure?
Oh, absolutely. It's really difficult because, as you guys know, there are days where you might be camped somewhere and you can relax and have your daily routine, but then you're on the road, or you're out doing something, or you're trying to film something for the YouTube channel or podcast or whatever it happens to be. And for me, that is the big distraction, and it really gets me off of my daily writing habit. So what I like to do, or what Kate and I like to do, is try to find blocks of time where we can go somewhere and spend a couple weeks and just knock out work.
That was one of my questions, actually, was do you go to the same place every day to write, or does it not matter where you're at, as long as you can get in that time?
It doesn't matter, but for me, the way I am, I like to have the same place, same time of day, because I know my brain is in that right spot. So for example, if I was to sit down and try to write as I'm drinking my first cup of coffee in the morning, the writing at first is going to come really slow. And that's going to kind of discourage me. And as the caffeine starts to kick in, by that point, I'm like, you know what? Today's not the day. I close the laptop, put it away. Now, if I sit down, relax, have my morning coffee, maybe check email, and by the time the caffeine kicks in, if I sit down and write then, I'm golden and I can just keep going for a couple hours.
Tell us, how long did it take you to write the first book?
Well, let's see. I started getting mentored in January-ish of 2017. The book was published October of 2017. I was able to knock out the first, basically write the entire book within, I would say, about a month and a half. Getting it written is easy, but when you're writing and you're just trying to focus on writing and not worried about going back to correct things, when Kate went back and read my book, it was like a second grader had written it. She would have to stop and ask me, says, "What do you mean here?" And I was like, I have no idea. So there is an extensive editing process to the point where Kate or someone else has come back to me and said, you know what, this chapter either doesn't make sense, it doesn't fit in the context of everything else. You need to go back and rewrite it. You have to be willing to sit down and not have an ego around your writing and be able to sit down and say, you know what, they're right. I need to go back, redo this whole thing, and do that a couple times. And a lot of authors will tell you that, a lot more time is spent rewriting the book than the initial write.
See, but I think that's really good, though. A month and a half to write an entire book. And from what it sounds like, it wasn't like something that you had been planning for a long time. It doesn't sound like you just woke up one day either and said, hey, I want to start writing a book. But I think a month and a half for your first book to write, even if it was on a second grade level, I think is still pretty impressive.
Yeah. There are a lot of people that they do, like my buddy, Kevin Tumlinson, who mentored me. He puts out about a book a month, and that includes the writing, the editing, all the stuff that goes along with it. So there are people that kind of are able to get into that rhythm and really churn things out and make a quality product. And, it is a great way to either supplement your income or turn it into an income generating source altogether.
Now, your first book did very well. Was that part of your thinking too? Were you looking at the book as a source of income, or was it purely this is like a passion project? I want to be able to do one book. I just want to do it once and see how it goes.
So it was a total passion project. My thing was I was hoping that it would at least help a couple people, and I could use it as a resource to point them towards if they were having difficulty or they were stressed. Going from living in a house full-time to living on the road full-time can be a stressful transition. Absolutely. So I was hoping that I could show this book to people and say, hey, we went through it too. Here's the way we handled it. Hopefully this helps you in some way. I had no idea if people would buy the book. I had no expectations whatsoever. And I think I told myself that if the book made $1,000 all in together, I would be very happy. And it did that and went beyond it. So I am more than happy with the success of the book.
Now, with the second book, it starts out with your first day on the road and documents the first year and a half of your RV life, and you're sharing both the good and the bad. So was it difficult to share some of the not so glamorous parts?
Yes. In Tales from the Road, when I sat down and I started writing that, there was a section in there, a chapter called, I think it's called The Pullover, where Kate and I were about a month in. We were both butting heads. We weren't getting along too well. In the back of my head, I was thinking, I don't know how much longer I can live this lifestyle if we are like this together. And there was one day she just had enough. She pulled over at a rest area. We got out and she's like, we need to talk. And the problem was neither one of us were on the same page. There was a lot going on with her, a lot going on with me. We both wanted the same thing, which was we'd only planned to do this for a year, but we wanted to kind of make it a permanent lifestyle. We couldn't see ourselves going back to corporate America. And we both had our different ideas of how to get there. And neither one of us were on the same page, and we were getting frustrated at each other because we thought the other one didn't want to do that at all. Once we were able to get on the same page, the trip or the adventure, the lifestyle after that was a lot smoother. The thing is, sharing that in a book and kind of pouring out your emotions, looking at it, and I'm writing it from my perspective. So in my head, I have certain thoughts about Kate that she may not particularly like having in a book. Figuring out a way to write that so we can share our feelings, but make sure people understand that Kate had her perspective, I had my perspective, and here's what happened.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't even think about that part of it. I'm just thinking, you're sharing. I must be a selfish person, but I'm thinking you're sharing your story and your point of view. I didn't even really think about how that would affect Kate as she's reading the story, because of course she's involved in the same situation and has probably a completely different point of view of the same situation. That's really interesting.
Exactly. So the tough part is trying to write something from my perspective, but also include tidbits for the reader that helps clue them into what's going on in Kate's head and why she says things that she does, or I say things that I do, even when things are going really well. It's hard to encompass both people's perspective in a book when you're writing it from one person.
So you had mentioned that you guys had getting into the RV and thought that you would do it for 1 year. Was that just like, all right, we're going to give it a year. If it doesn't work, then we go back to the sticks and bricks type of lifestyle?
Oh, so the thing was, we didn't plan for anything to work.
Okay.
We had no plans. Yeah. We had no plans to make money on the road. It was just going to be a year-long vacation. And we saved up enough money for a year and then some buffers so that when we found the next place we wanted to settle, we could buy another house, get jobs again, and kind of resume our old lifestyle. But the thing we realized was moving to another place wasn't going to solve what was bothering us, which was we were tired of kind of the standard American dream, which was have a house, a bunch of cars, climb up the corporate ladder and all of this stuff. And we didn't want to go back to that. We wanted to figure out, that's like when we did the pullover, Kate and I sat down and said, if we want to keep going and we want this lifestyle to work, we're going to have to figure out a way to make money. And it went from, the website at the time went from, this is just a little pet project to share with our friends, to we need to turn this into something that starts generating some revenue for us. And at the time, we didn't even have we had a couple videos up on YouTube, but we had no thought or inclination to make YouTube what it is today.
So you guys started the website and then the YouTube channel quickly followed?
No, the website started actually before we hit right around the time we hit the road. Again, it was just a way to share with friends what was going on. The YouTube channel actually didn't start until December 2014 or 15. Sorry. It was one of those things where we had met up with another RVer. He put a camera in his face or in our faces and said, all right, you're going to be on my YouTube channel. Here's a shout out. Now you guys need to go and start making videos. And the next day we went out and shot our first vlog and kind of started vlogging for a while, but it wasn't until January of 2016 that we went to the Tampa RV show and started doing walkthroughs and things like that, where our channel really started to pick up a little bit. And we said, hey, we might be onto something. Maybe we could make this work. And a year later, we were covering our expenses between our website, affiliate programs, and YouTube channel.
I know you were in a Heimer for a while. Did you start in a small space like that as well?
Well, we thought it was small at the time. We started in a 30-foot or just under 30-foot Class A motorhome. We originally, when we first started looking, we were looking at 38-foot plus diesel pushers. And eventually, as we went through our shopping process, we had people that we'd met that said, you may not want to go so big. Why don't you look at something smaller? So the Newmar we bought at the time, it was a 2903. We thought that was actually pretty small. We had looked at some smaller things like maybe a Winnebago View or kind of those small Cs. The problem was we had two big dogs and we didn't think that we could live in there, have all of our stuff plus two big dogs. That's why we ended up with the Class A.
In this book, you're in the Class A, and you do the transition in this book from the Class A to the van?
Kind of. This book documents the year and a half we spent in our Class A, and it tells the tale all the way through to when we found the Heimer, said, this is the one we're looking for, and struck the deal with Heimer for our partnership that lasted a couple of years with them. And that's about where the book ends. So the third book might pick up there and do van life, but I'm also considering, rather than doing kind of a day-to-day account of what van life was like, maybe something a bit off the cuff about some of the different aspects of van life. The way we're looking at this book series is our goal is really to inspire others to live the life they want. And that may not be RV life. A lot of the stuff I talk about and take risks could apply to any facet of life. I think a lot of the things I talk about in Tales from the Open Road, although it's centered around RV life, it's also talking about ways that we minimized our lives. We took a different look at our lifestyle and said, with these changes we've made, we really enjoy it. And I think in book 3, that's kind of going to follow that narrative, which is you may not be in the vans, but there's a lot of things we learn that anyone can apply to their lifestyle.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, actually, about your first book, Take Risks. After I read it, I do remember thinking to myself, you know what, this does apply to more than just RV. And this applies to anybody that's not happy with their life, that they may feel like they don't have options, but you really do. You can make changes, and they don't always even have to be so extreme, but you can make small changes. You make small changes, you know, on monthly, weekly, yearly basis. And you can change, a lot of times you can change the situation that you're in for the better.
Yeah, and for a great example is a friend of ours. He was working at a job he wasn't quite happy with, or not happy at all. When I would sit down and talk to him over a beer or something, you know, his thing was, I really am not interested in doing what you guys are doing. But I kind of coached him through the thought process, which is your ideal lifestyle might be something completely different. You don't need to be on the road or traveling. And what he eventually learned, and what he told me a couple of weeks ago, was that it was his ideal lifestyle was 4 feet away. And what he meant by that was he was working in a family business. The dynamics were just not good. He was not enjoying himself. But he took a couple steps back away from that company, said goodbye and thank you. And once he took those few steps back, he was happy. And he's living his life the way he wants to now. He works on the jobs he wants to. And that's all he needed to make his life exactly what he wanted.
Yeah, I think, like you said, though, you know, it's a perfect title, Take Risk. It is a risk. Even if you're miserable in your life, it's very familiar to you, and you are taking a risk of changing things. And I guess there's always a possibility, as bad as things are, they could always be worse. But you got to take that risk and say, look, I'm going to work towards making things better.
Yeah, and then it continues in Tales from the Open Road, where we continued to take risks while we were on the road and actually try to turn this into a sustainable lifestyle for ourselves.
Yeah, it's nothing set in stone. There was no guarantees at all, I'm sure.
So with your first book, you probably learned some marketing lessons and basically the whole self-publication process. Are there any valuable lessons you learned from that first book that you applied to the second book, and things you would like to share with the readers, sort of the struggles that you went through in publishing?
The biggest struggle I had with the first book was I wasn't sure if anyone would even read it. So I wasn't willing to put in any money or additional effort into the book. That doesn't quite sound right, but what I mean by that is I didn't want to go out and hire a professional editor. I didn't want to hire someone to design the cover. And I did everything myself. Kate was my editor. I handed the book to a couple friends and family. They went through, read it, let us know what they thought, found mistakes. Kate probably read that book 10 or 15 times, and I think she's completely sick of it, or was sick of it by the end of the process. So even just getting the book published, I learned a lot of lessons, which was have some faith in yourself and really put your best foot forward. And what I did was I went back on the first book and I had the cover redesigned by a professional. For this book, from the get-go, I'm having a professional design the cover. I had a couple professional editors look through the book and provide their comments and edits. So Kate's only read it a couple times so far. Those were some great lessons learned. The other one was in terms of marketing. Again, I didn't really have confidence in the book, so I didn't push it out to too many people. It was kind of like I put it up for sale and then just started to kind of let people know about it. Whereas in this one, I'm trying to let people know about it beforehand. So by the time this podcast is up, Tales from the Open Road should be on Amazon, available for pre-order for people. I think just having that confidence that people want to read the book, they're interested, really helps in the marketing effort and how far you're willing to go to promote that book to people and use your audience. So turning around, looking at your audience, that audience you've built up, and getting the book out to them For anyone listening to this that doesn't have an audience built up, my advice to you would be, as you begin to write the book, start a Facebook group, start collecting emails and get people on an email list where you can give them updates. And maybe if you're telling people about your process to write the book and gaining a following that way. But you need a following to get the book out there, get it rolling on Amazon or wherever you decide to publish it, and then have those people kind of share your book with others to really make it a success.
Yeah, and I noticed too when you were when we saw you at the RVE Summit, I guess this was 2018. You actually gave a little talk about your process for writing the book and publishing it, and you brought copies with you. Do you think that type of like grassroots or on the ground marketing really helped your sales of the book and distribution?
Absolutely. I think it's all about getting the book into people's hands, and don't be afraid to give away copies. Don't be afraid to let some people have it. For this book launch, I actually had about 30 people who got the book, a beta version of the book, got to go through it, provide their thoughts and their feedback. And at the end of the book, they'll have their names and stuff as part of the, thank you to everyone. It's a great way for people to become invested in the book, tell you what they think, and then tell others what they think.
Yeah, word of mouth is very strong. When the book, I know when I read it, I told everybody that I could tell, on social media too, on our YouTube channel and our Instagram, because I really enjoyed it. I found it inspiring. I wanted other people to read it. So I think when you have a book that's good like that, and like you said, you're okay with handing out a couple of books. I bought the book, by the way, but if you're okay with
thank you.
If you're okay with handing out the book and somebody reads it, that one person that you gave that book to enjoyed it so much, and they told 20 people, and out of those 20 people, maybe 5 of them bought the book. I think that's a smart strategy as well.
Do you have a date for the publication of this second book?
So I think I just got the almost final version of the cover. So once the cover is finalized, the cool thing about Amazon is the book actually doesn't have to be finished in order for you to start your pre-sale. So I'm looking to start the pre-sale about mid-July, and I'll run that for about 30 days. So mid-August is when people should get the book delivered to their inbox or their Kindle or whatever they happen to use. I'm also going to publish a paperback version of Tales from the Open Road. And one other thing that people have been asking me nonstop, and I've kind of been dragging my heels doing it, is an audiobook or Take Risks. So I've already recorded the first few chapters, and as soon as that's done, and then I get Tales from the Open Road out and published, I'm going to start the audiobook for Tales from the Open Road.
Now, will the Take Risks, are you recording that yourself, Joe?
I had thought about having a professional do it, going back to having, professional design a cover, edit your book, that sort of thing. But as I was talking to people who were really in the audiobook, their opinion, and I agree with, is it would be strange to read a book from someone they know and not have it be their voice. Because what a lot of people have told me is as they read the book, they hear me talking as they're reading. So they said if someone else was to come through and read the book, read you in someone else's voice, it would be very off-putting.
Yeah, we listen to a lot of audiobooks traveling all the time. There's some places where you just can't find a good radio station. So we do listen to a lot of audiobooks, and we prefer books that are read by the actual author because you get sort of the passion behind what they're talking about as well. It's not somebody that is completely disconnected from the story. You're talking to the person that actually lived the story. So it definitely makes for a better book.
I was going to say it the other way around, Sean. You said it in a better way. I was going to say that Sabrina and I, when we've listened to audiobooks from people and it's not the author, we always felt that it's dry. So I think it definitely makes more sense to have the actual author reading the book and to hear the passion in their voice.
Well, I wanted to say one interesting thing, especially about book 2, is Kate keeps a daily diary of like what we had to eat, what the weather was like, how we were feeling, what we did that day. And I used that for writing the books. So a lot of people have asked when there are conversations in the book, how can I remember all of that? Well, that's how. And the nice thing is when I go back and I'm doing the reading for the audiobook, I remember a lot of the emotions that were behind that. And I can kind of recreate that as I'm having the conversation for the audiobook.
See, I'm going to pick up the audiobook, and I've already read the book. I'm curious to hear it.
Well, I'll send it to you once it's done.
Oh, even better. I like the sound of that even better, Joe. So could you tell us, can we just back up a little bit? You had said that, in the second book, you're using professionals, you're getting editors. What's your process of finding and narrowing down who to use? Like what type of editor? Where do you even begin to search for one? And how do you build a trust that, okay, this is the guy or the girl that I'm going with, or the company that I'm going with?
There are a lot of Facebook groups out there. One I'm part of, it's called 20 to 40K. It's a Facebook group for writers, and if you want, I can explain that name later. But then there are subsets of that group, which are like cover design and also editors. So if you're on there and you're part of that group and you're looking for editors, you can post things to have people get in touch with you. That's how I found. Oh, I'm sorry. The name of the group is 20 Books to 50K. And you can post things up there asking for help, or if people know of editors, or if there are editors in the group that are interested or have time to work on your book. The way I found my cover designer was just that. I posted something up. A few people wrote back. They sent over examples of stuff they've done in the past. And I found a woman that had done designs that I felt kind of resonated with the feelings behind my books. I went with the same designer for book 2. In terms of editors, what I did was I put out in our weekly news or biweekly newsletter just calls for, hey, if you're an editor and you have a passion about this stuff, I'm interested in talking to you. And I got a lot of people responding to that. And through that, a few people were willing to take on the project. They all sent me their comments back and they got integrated into the book. So for me, I used my network, which I always encourage people to do. And our network, I just so happen to be the newsletter. And there's a lot of great people there who were able to help.
Yeah, that 20 Books to 50K is a really good Facebook group. I really like the way that group is conducted. It's very helpful and not any negativity on there whatsoever. So it's really easy and comfortable to ask questions about subjects that surround writing, whether it's nonfiction, fiction, no matter what genre. So yeah, I agree with you, Joe. That's a really good group.
Absolutely. And I would also suggest that anyone who is in the writing process, if you're looking at having a professional do something like editing or cover design, keep in mind there, for people who are good, there's always going to be a lead time, but you also want to find people who understand your genre. So if you're writing romance novels, you don't want to get someone who's more a nonfiction editor, because there are nuances and there's big differences in how you express yourself. So just keep that in the back of your head.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And then also with having a professional editor and the person doing your cover art, Joe, not only did it provide, I guess, a more polished product, but would you say that it helps with the stress level of trying to do everything yourself?
Oh, yeah. The big stress level on me when I started book 2 was writing it and then remembering how much back and forth Kate and I did and all of that. It was not a pleasant process. And it was so much nicer to hand it off to people, have them look at it and give you their comments back. And a lot of the comments were things that Kate or I had never considered because we were so close to the content.
Yeah.
So it was nice to have a third party look at it. And yes, the polish part is really, I think, really important, because when you're on Amazon or any other site and you're looking for books, it's just like being on YouTube. You see two things that basically sell the book. It's the cover and the title. And if someone likes the cover, they like the title and they click, more than likely they're going to buy your book.
In a sense, I guess it's like the thumbnail.
That's exactly what it is.
Do readers have to read the first book in order to understand the second book, or are they independent?
No, they're independent of each other. So if you picked up book 2, Tales from the Open Road, and read it, you would get it, because I go back and I kind of retell part of the story, not to the extent of book 1, but enough that if a reader picks up that book, they can read it and not feel like they missed out on anything. Of course, I'd love for them to start with book 1 and kind of just segue into book 2. But yeah, book 2 is definitely a standalone.
So they can also go backwards, right? So if they read and like book 2, they can go back and read book 1 and won't feel like it's a huge repeat for them.
Absolutely. I think it would be like watching a prequel. So it goes back and explains the whole backstory of how or why we did what we did.
What do you hope that the readers, I guess particularly your RVers or aspiring RVers, get out of reading the books? Are there lessons that you want the readers to to get, or is it just more aimed at getting your story out?
We're hoping that it inspires people to get on the road or to travel or to do whatever it is that's been in the back of their head to go out and do. We feel like a great way to inspire is by sharing our story so that people feel less intimidated about doing it, or they see other people that are doing it and here's their process, which in some cases might mirror exactly what they do, or it's completely different, but it gives them a different way of thinking about things. You know, our story is, for most parts on YouTube, and that it's out there and people know about it, but this is more the backstory and how we got through a lot of stuff, what life was like for us before we ever started our YouTube channel and we started sharing our lives online. At the end of the day, if I inspire someone through this book, I've done my job.
Yeah, and I think that's really one of the important things in the channel and in these books is that you show your failures, but yet you guys survived. You guys are still out there. You're living it. You're loving it. And, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. You'll be okay. It's just all part of the process.
Yeah. And what's funny is you get the people who thank you for sharing your mistakes, but then you also get the people who like to leave the comments about how wrong you really were and you should have done it this way or done it that way. And you know what? I think, to your point, if by sharing our mistakes and what we did wrong, if that helps someone else to realize, hey, I should do things differently, or I might want to watch out for this, then we've done our job, and I don't really care what other people think.
Yeah, because you know what, Joe? Even when you do things right, especially on YouTube, people will still tell you there's a better way.
Yeah.
So you're kind of getting it either way. If you're right or wrong, you're wrong.
Yep.
So I know we're talking mostly about the first book, and I mean the second book, and we're focused on this upcoming book. But let's jump back to your first book. And if people are interested in reading this book, where can they go to get it? I know you said it's on Amazon. What other platforms can they go to be able to read that first book?
It's pretty much on every platform that's out there for the moment. I'm thinking about possibly just recalling that and putting everything on Amazon, because that is, if you are a self-published author, I would say that's about 95% of our sales, if not more. But if people prefer Nook or they prefer Apple, they can find the book there as well. But the only place to purchase a paperback copy is on Amazon.
Okay. And then the second book, it's going to be up for pre-sale, you said, the middle of July, hopefully, and delivered hopefully in about 30 days of that start of that pre-sale. Will that just be available on Amazon, or are there other platforms for that book as well?
Yes. So I think that book 2 is going to be strictly on Amazon. We might try to sell through our own website. That we're still looking at that. So that could be another option, especially for the digital version of the book, because that can just be delivered straight to someone immediately. So Amazon, and then definitely check our website, we'retherussos.com, because we may have the book up there as well. If I ever see people in person and they have the paperback, I'm always happy to sign it for them.
Will you do a scheduled book signing, you think, Joe?
I don't know. I looked at doing them for the first book. The problem is a lot of places where you do book signings, like a Barnes and Noble or that, they won't sign you up if you don't have like the books in their store, you're not a big time author and everything else. So I might try to schedule something on my own, but who knows? We'll see. Usually what we were doing in the past is we would have meet and greets at RV shows or things like that, and people could bring their books in and I'd sign them.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I guess the other issue is, since you're in an RV, it's hard to carry around a lot of printed copies with you.
Oh yeah, that's always a difficult thing. And the other problem is we never quite know where we're going to be. We don't plan that far ahead or plan much at all. So for us to do a book signing at some place and give them 3 months notice and say we're going to be here then is really difficult for us.
That makes sense. It would be tough.
So besides reading the books, how else can people learn about you and sort of follow your journey?
We always like to send people to our website, we'retherussos.com, because we post up our latest videos there. We have all sorts of different resources. If you're looking to travel someplace, go on our website, search for the destination, and there's a good chance we've been there, and we will put up articles about things to do, places to eat, how dog friendly the area is. We talk about cell phone connection on BLM spots. So if you're looking for a BLM spot and you're wondering whether or not you're going to be able to work or have a call from that location, we post that information. And we do a lot of different reviews about certain products and things like that.
You guys are doing more than I realized.
Yeah, we actually had a meeting about that the other day, and we kind of drew a diagram of all the different things we have our fingers into, and we need an assistant. We're looking to actually start growing a little bit of a team.
Oh, okay. See, I thought you were going to say the opposite and maybe streamline or cut back, but you're looking to expand. That's very cool. That's pretty exciting and probably scary all at the same time.
Yes, it is. And actually, so I think we're looking to streamline and cut back, but we're also looking for people to take over some of the stuff that they're able to, if that makes any sense.
A little bit, just a smidge.
So that 1 year journey has turned into several years now. Do you see yourselves doing anything else in the foreseeable future? Or are you guys staying on the road for as far in the future as you can see?
I would say in the near future, we're definitely staying on the road. I think we're also going to include things like going on international travel, and whether we rent or take an RV across overseas or down through Central South America, that's an option, or we just take backpacks and go with us. But I think what we've realized is we love seeing the world. We love getting out there, and we really don't want that to stop. We do like the idea of having a home base. A place where we can go just relax for a couple months, get our work done, kind of recharge, and then get back out there. So as we're traveling, we're keeping an eye open for places with land. And what Kate and I have kind of come to terms with is we'd like a large property that is about 30 to 45 minutes from a grocery store and 2 to 2.5 hours from an international airport. And we'd put pads and RV hookups for friends.
Okay, very nice. Perfect.
We're all excited to read the second book. Are you already working on book 3, or do you have ideas for book 3?
Yeah, so I started working on book 3, which was kind of just an extension of book 2, but I've decided to scrap that and, as I mentioned earlier, go in a different direction. I'm not really sure what that direction is yet, but my project at the moment is to get the audiobooks done and then start working on book 3.
I think that is all of our questions. Is there anything, Joe, that you can think of that maybe Sean or I missed, or that you would like to go back and highlight, or anything else that you would like to add?
I think you guys have covered everything. I just want to let everyone know that my first book was Take Risks, One Couple's Journey to Quit Their Jobs and Hit the Open Road. And book 2 is Tales from the Open Road, The Adventures and Misadventures of RV Living.
Well, thanks, Joe. We really appreciate you coming on the show and chatting with us. I had a lot of fun, and I'm sure our listeners will enjoy listening as well.
I had a blast. So thank you, guys.
We want to thank Joe for coming on the show and sharing his book writing process, what he has learned, some of his stories, and what to expect from the third book. After we stopped recording, Joe also offered some signed copies of his first 2 books, Take Risks and Tales from the Open Road, to our listeners. We will keep you informed of how and when to enter for the giveaway. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we wish you safe travels. This episode is brought to you by Battleborn Batteries, the best name in the RV and marine industry. These lithium batteries are designed and assembled in the USA, backed by a 10-year warranty. The best solution for your battery anxiety, so go check them out at battlebornbatteries.com.